Good morning, everybody. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to another week of your online learning. And this week, we're going to be talking about the Great Depression. Since we're discussing some of the events that have led up to World War II, we wanted to discuss the Great Depression, how that affected the United States and the world. But we're going to be looking at this a little bit more from the United States perspective of how the Great Depression was started here and how that affected the rest of the world and led up to World War II. You're going to be having a lot of information based off of some readings that you're going to do, some videos that you're going to watch, and questions that go along with those, as well as finishing up your Empowers and your CNN 10 news that you're going to be watching. So without further ado, let's get to this slideshow, which is going to give you a brief overview of some of the information about the Great Depression, some key terms, and some facts that go along with it. So let's get started. First thing, we're going to go over our learning intentions, and the content intention for this unit is to analyze the complex factors that contributed to causing the Great Depression. The language intention is to reflect on how circumstances changed quickly for the world during the Great Depression and compare that situation to what we are in today. Our social intention is to involve outside current event knowledge while participating in discussions with classmates and teachers. And you'll know you're successful at the end of this unit if you can explain the 5 factors that caused the Great Depression. And you can explain how a speech from the 1930s can be relevant today, and that will be a part of one of the readings that you're going to be doing. So now let's get into this overview. What was the Great Depression? What are we talking about? What's a stock market? Let's find out. So in order to understand the Great Depression, which was mostly in the 30s, we need to understand what was happening in the 20s prior to that. The 20s were also known as the Jazz Age. And during that time, there was a lot of prosperity. World War I was over. The Spanish flu was over. There wasn't as much death. People were happier. They wanted to celebrate. And as you can see from this graph right here, the rich were getting richer. The top 1% had the same amount of money as the bottom 42%. So if we had 1,000 people in our school, one person would have the same amount of money as 42 other people. 420 other people, I'm sorry. Also, the top 1%, so the top 100 people had more money than the other 900 people, according to this chart in 1920. So the rich were getting a lot richer, the poor were growing in numbers. One way that people were trying to make money was buying stock, buying part of a company, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And one way that was happening was that people were buying it with credit. So people's debt was going up tremendously. There's a lot of new inventions. There's a lot of new products that were available to people, and they wanted to have the best, the newest, and all of that. And so a lot of people in the United States and in the world started getting into debt, which was dangerous. And you can see why. So when we talk about the Great Depression, this term, Great Depression, it's not just about your emotional feelings. It's not about being sad or lonely or helpless or hopeless or any of those terms that we associate with being depressed. This is talking about economics, which is money. And the Great Depression was the worst economic downturn in American history. It lasted for about 10 years. And the time that we say it started was with the stock market crash, and we will talk about that. And one of the most important facts that went along with it in the United States, 1 out of every 4 people did not have a job. And you can see from these pictures that are on the screen, there's 2 men that have signs around their necks that are trying to get a job and promoting themselves for why they need a job. And then the bottom picture is people standing in line trying to get some food or trying to get a job as well. So one of the key terms that we're going to talk about next to this disturbing picture is a stock. And a stock is when you have done your research on a company and you know that that company is doing good things and you want to make money along with that company, you buy a stock, which means you buy a part of that company. You have a share in that company. So when the stock rises, when the stock market goes up and that company's stock goes up, you make money based off of what you've put in. If the stock market goes down and that company's stock value goes down, you lose money. And in Wall Street, which is the epicenter for the stock market for the United States, that's where the New York Stock Exchange is, which is one of the biggest in the world. On October 29th, 1929, which is also known as Black Tuesday, the stock market crashed. Stockholders began selling off of their shares. And when you sell your shares, the value of a stock goes down, and so many people were selling their shares of stocks because they anticipated some negative things happening, and they started to sell. People began to panic, which dropped all of the prices or most of the prices on stock to zero. So you tried to sell it as quickly as possible, but the longer you waited, the less value you were getting back. So a lot of people were losing money because the stock market crashed. At the same time, another factor was that when people saw that the stocks were going down and they needed to get their money, they said, okay, well, now I'm going to run to the bank to get their money. But the money wasn't actually in the bank. A lot of the banks put your money or our money into the stock market in order for the banks to make more money and to always have that extra amount, that percentage of equity to come back to them. Because the economy looked like it was doing well, even though people were buying things, and we know that they were buying things on credit and going into debt, it seemed like a lot of people were doing really well. So the banks were loaning out more and more money. And because they were loaning out more money and put money in the stock market, there wasn't enough money if all of us went to the bank at the same time to collect that money that we had put in our accounts. There wasn't enough in the bank at the time, which caused banks to close. So you can imagine how frustrated people would have been going into the bank saying, I put in $5,000, I need my $5,000, and the bank saying, I'm sorry, we don't have that money, or we only have 400 of that to give you right now. There wasn't anything that insured our money in the bank. If you put money in the bank, you were kind of at the whim of hoping and assuming that the bank would take care of it for you, trusting that the bank would take care of it for you. Luckily, that's not the case anymore. But at the time, if you put your money in a bank, it wasn't guaranteed that you were going to get it all back. So now we have the stock market crashing, which companies lost a lot of money, people lost a lot of money, banks had run out of money, and everybody was trying to get to the bank to get their money out, but the banks weren't able to give all that money back. So now there's no buyers left. Fear leads to no one buying. There's no one spending any money like they did in the 1920s, throughout the 1920s. And as you can see from this image right here, this was happening on farms, this was happening in factories. In anticipation of people buying things on credit and raising their debt, factories were producing a lot of products because they had been doing really well. But since now people had lost money and people were afraid that they weren't going to be able to get any more money, they stopped going out and buying things, which is this one over here where it says demands for good fell. So if no one's going out to buy anything, people aren't demanding these products. And that's going to cause people to cut production. So if you stop producing things, you don't need people to make these products anymore. So jobs are cut. Or their wages were dropped a lot. So now either you're still working, but you're not making a lot of money, or you're not working that much, or you just got laid off completely. And now people have little or no money to spend, so they're not buying anything, which means that the price for the goods are dropping, and the businesses keep cycling around. It keeps getting worse and worse. So more jobs are cut, less product is being made, less money is going out into our economy, and that causes unemployment to rise tremendously. At the same time, you're hoping, okay, even if the United States isn't buying things, maybe other parts of the world can buy things from us. We did a lot of trade. We helped other countries out, and they helped us out. But during this time, Europe is still rebuilding after World War I. The economies of a lot of the European countries were still in bad shape, and because of the stock market crash, it made it even worse. It wasn't just affecting the US, it was affecting the rest of the world. Taxes were going up, trade was going up. Trade was going down, taxes were going up. And Europe wasn't about to spend a lot of money to help out the United States because they were spending that money trying to fix their countries that had been destroyed by war or destroyed by a lot of the death that was happening, and trying to rebuild the cities that were bombed. And this caused world trade to fall by 40%, which is a tremendous amount. The last thing, as we talked about with the farming and factories, so farmers were producing a lot of products, and they were over farming. And soil is not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to over farm. You're supposed to have a specific idea of what you're going to grow in certain areas. But because these farmers were making a lot of money out of it, they said, the more that we can plant, the more that we can grow, the more we can sell. And there was a lot of things that happened at the same time, and it caused something called the Dust Bowl. But there was a lot of drought during 1930, so right after the stock market. There wasn't a lot of rain, so the soil was even worse. There had been over farming from overproduction. Food prices had to go up in order to try to keep these farmers making money. But since there's not a lot of people that are buying things and the production has gone down, people aren't willing to spend a lot of money on these products. And so food prices were going up and farmers were losing a lot of money. They had to leave their farms. They were getting repossessed. The banks were taking their homes, or they couldn't pay the rent anymore. And so there was drought, there was overproduction, the soil was bad, the prices weren't good, and farmers had to move out from this part of the country in the middle of our country, and they had to start moving west. And you can see all of these arrows of where people started to move, and those people that moved were called Okies. Now, the big thing that happened because of all that loose soil and the severe drought, there was a lot of big windstorms and big erosion from the dirt, and these storms that came through caused a big dust bowl. And you can see in this picture, all of this area was affected by dust storms from these images on the right, and that affected everybody. It affected all these farms, it affected all these businesses, and it caused so many people to have to leave the area to try to find work, to try to support themselves and their families. So that is the basic overview of what was happening and causing the Great Depression. Those are 5 factors that caused the Great Depression. There's a video that's right here that you can watch. You don't have to. This is about 55 minutes, but there will be some other videos, some shorter ones with questions embedded in them that you will have to answer. This is just something that's supplemental for you to enjoy if you need to. There's also going to be some readings for you to do about what was happening with some people and some of their experiences, and we're going to want you to reflect and see if some of these situations seem similar to you, things that you're hearing, things that you're seeing in the current state that we're in right now. I hope that was helpful for you guys. You enjoyed it, and I will talk to you soon.